Here's every review for every electrician in this market, 1,200 of them. 96% of these reviews are 5 stars, which means that here, star rating by itself can't distinguish one business from another. Now, that's this market. Yours may or may not look the same, and it's worth finding out. Because if it does, then having a 5-star average isn't what separates you. Many businesses have that. What varies is how many reviews sit behind it. So I split the reviews into 5 separate things you can actually measure, and I tested each one against real ranking data. In this video, the business names in the reports are changed, as always, but the data and the rankings are real. So let's get started. Every episode in this series on Google Business Profiles has landed in a similar place. The thing everybody tells you to optimize turns out to be table stakes, a requirement to even get in the door. Categories, photos, posts. You don't win by doing them, you lose by not doing them. Reviews are supposed to be different. Industry surveys put them near the top of the list for local ranking. And Google itself has said review count and score factor into local ranking. But nobody ever says which part of reviews is the component that actually gets weighted. Is it how many reviews you have, your star rating, how recent they are, whether you reply to them or not, or what customers actually write about you? Those are 5 different things, and there's no reason they'd be weighted the same way. So let's find out which ones matter. First up is count, the total number of reviews against actual grid visibility across all 34 businesses. The correlation comes in at minus 0.476. That's a Spearman correlation, which measures whether two things move together even when the relationship isn't a straight line. Minus 0.476 is moderate, and it's the strongest single correlation I've found anywhere in this series. More reviews does indeed track with better visibility here. This is one place where the standard advice holds up. It's also the one you have the least control over. You can't simply decide to have 400 reviews next quarter. That takes years of work, one customer at a time. Second is response rate. What percentage of reviews does the owner actually reply to? Minus 0.441, almost as strong as count. And this is one you can start today. It costs you time and nothing else. And if responding to reviews isn't your strong point, you can even have AI help you with that. Now, I want to be straightforward about how noisy this data is. The number one business in this market replies to 4% of its reviews. The 4th place business replies to 9%. Meanwhile, the heavy responders, one at 100% and another at 92%, are clustered near the top 2. So responding is, at best, a tendency, not a rule. 2 of the top 4 ignore it completely and win anyway. And one more caveat. For the businesses with hundreds of reviews, the tool I'm using can only pull the most recent couple of hundred. So the response rate reflects how they're behaving lately, not their entire history. Next is star rating, the average rating across all of their reviews. The correlation is positive 0.008. That's nothing. Then recency, how new the newest review is, positive 0.176 and pointing the wrong way, meaning the businesses with the most recent reviews don't necessarily rank higher. Finally, there's sentiment, what customers actually say in the text. Is it positive or negative overall? I ran all 1,200 reviews through 4 different scorers, 2 large language models, and 2 versions of Google's Cloud Natural Language API. None of them showed any relationship between how positive the reviews sounded and how well the business ranked. Rating and sentiment came back empty for the same reason. When 96% of your reviews are 5 stars, and every business in this market sits between 4.3 and 5, there's almost no variation left to measure. Star rating can't tell these businesses apart because they're all at the top of the scale already. Sentiment can't tell them apart either for the same reason. Everyone's already there, so it's not a differentiator. Recency is different. Businesses here genuinely do vary in how recently they've been reviewed. It just doesn't line up with how well they rank. I should be upfront about one limitation. I ran 8 separate tests here on 28 businesses. When you run that many tests on a group that small, statistics says you should expect at least one of them to look like a real pattern purely by chance, even if nothing's there. So how do you tell the difference? The strength of the result. Count and response rate both came in around minus 0.45. That's a moderate correlation, and it's unlikely to show up by accident. The weak ones are different. Recency at 0.176 is exactly the kind of number that could be pure noise. If that had been my only finding, I wouldn't report it at all. The sentiment test came back empty, but the way it came back empty turned out to be worth the detour. I ran all 1,200 reviews through 4 different scorers. Google's Cloud Natural Language API version 1, which is a classical machine learning model from 2016. Version 2 of that same API, which runs on one of Google's language models from 2023. Claude Sonnet and Gemini Flash. Same text, same scale, same prompt for the 2 language models. 1,200 reviews, 4 times over. Here's the whole result in one table, and it's actually cleaner than I expected. The 2 language models agree with each other almost perfectly. Claude and Gemini, 0.989. Out of 1,200 reviews, they never once disagreed about whether a review was positive or negative. Different companies, different models, effectively interchangeable. The 2 versions of Google's classifier also agree with each other, 0.93. But across those 2 groups, agreement falls apart. And there's a second number in that table that matters more. If you ask not just, do they agree on direction, but do they agree on ranking one glowing review against another, Claude and Gemini hold at 0.825. Both versions of the classifier collapse to near 0 against either language model. So this isn't AI models disagreeing about sentiment in general. 2 of them are nearly identical. The classifier is doing something structurally different. Now, my first guess was that this was just about age. Version 1 of the Google Natural Language API is from 2016, before language models could read text the way they do now. Of course it would look different. So I ran version 2, which Google built on one of its own language models in 2023. If age were the explanation, version 2 should move more towards Claude and Gemini. It barely moved. On matching the star rating, version 1 comes in at 0.71, version 2 0.76, Claude 0.93, and Gemini 0.93. Version 2 nudges toward the language models and then stops well short. And on ranking agreement, it doesn't improve at all. It's actually slightly worse than version 1. So the newer model does make a difference at the margin, but the divide isn't old versus new. It's the architecture. Both versions of the Google Cloud Natural Language API return 2 separate numbers, a score for direction and a magnitude for how much emotional content is in the text. Both read the text 1 sentence at a time. And here's Google's own guide to reading those 2 numbers together. A score near 0 can mean one of 2 things. Either the text is genuinely flat, low emotion, low magnitude, or it's mixed, with positive and negative content canceling each other out. Low score but high magnitude. Version 2 inherits that design, and it inherits the behavior that comes with it. Which brings me to what that behavior actually is, and I want to be precise here because I nearly got this wrong. It is not true that the Google Cloud Natural Language API misreads praise. Across 1,000 strongly positive reviews, version 1 averages a score of 0.79. It reads them as positive correctly almost all the time. The interesting part is the tail. About 1% of the reviews, 14 of them, come back near 0. And when you read these 14, they have a specific shape. Here's one. Version 1 scores at 0.00. Dead neutral with a magnitude of 6.7. By Google's own definition, that's the classifier calling this review conflicted. Both language models score it above 0.9. Read it, and the customer calls this electrician honest, knowledgeable, smart, and fair. There is nothing negative in here about the business. But look at what else is in the review. Another company wanted $1,500 to replace the whole fixture. A second company gave him wrong advice. The GFI wouldn't reset. He got told to call somebody else. All of that is negative language, and none of it is about the business being reviewed. It's about the problem and about the other guys. The classifier reads sentence by sentence. It has no way to know the $1,500 quote belongs to a different contractor, so those sentences pull down the score of the business that actually fixed things. And that's the structure of most trade reviews. Here's what went wrong. Here's who fixed it, a problem and a resolution, which means a sentence level scorer will find a stack of negative language inside a review that's entirely complimentary. There's a second pattern in that tail. Look at how these customers write praise. Professional, diligent, courteous, honest, showed up on time, fair price, guaranteed the work. That's descriptive, not emotional. Nobody writes, "This changed my life," about a panel upgrade. They're saying the guy was competent and didn't overcharge them. Of the 10 most divergent reviews, 5 were exactly that, completely positive in substance, written in flat, factual language. Only 2 had a real complaint mixed in. So the classifier isn't broken, and it isn't wrong most of the time. It's measuring emotional intensity in text, which is what it was built to do. But in a review that's mostly a description of a problem written by someone who praises calmly, there isn't much emotional intensity to find. The language models read the whole thing, worked out who the compliments were about, and landed on strongly positive. The classifier read it a sentence at a time, and it couldn't. If you were going to run sentiment analysis on service reviews, that's the failure mode to know about. So where does that leave reviews in terms of ranking in the map pack? Overall review count is the strongest signal in this market, and it takes years to build up a real portfolio of reviews. Unfortunately, there's no shortcut. Responding to reviews tracks nearly as well, and you can start this afternoon. Just know that the business at number 1 here ignores it entirely, so don't treat it as a guarantee for ranking. But it's a great thing to do anyway, because it shows you actually value your customer relationships and their feedback. Prospective customers see that too. Rating, recency, and sentiment don't separate anybody, because in a market where almost every review is 5 stars, there's nothing left to separate. So what does get more 5-star reviews actually come down to? In this market, almost every review is 5 stars anyway, so it comes down to volume, how many. And how many you need depends on how competitive your market is. Here, the businesses at the top have hundreds. Smaller markets need fewer, and large urban markets need many more. And really, the customers motivated enough to write a review are usually either very pleased with your service or completely displeased. That's called the J-curve, and it's well documented across review platforms. Ratings cluster at the extremes because writing a review takes effort, and effort follows strong feeling. Merely satisfied customers usually don't bother. Which means a star rating isn't measuring average experience. It's measuring the ratio of delighted to angry among the people motivated enough to write something. 2 businesses can deliver identical service and land in different places depending on whether they ask for reviews, when they ask, and who they ask. So that's the last video in this Google Business Profile series. Next time, we're starting on some new areas and some new things. Subscribe if you're interested, and thanks for watching.